Tonight, we're slipping beneath the waves into a world that is darker, stranger, and far more mysterious than the one above. A place where sunlight fades, time stretches, and the rules that govern life above begin to loosen their grip. Down here, the ocean does something unexpected. In the cold, pressurized darkness, life does not shrink away, it expands. Across the deep sea, creatures grow to sizes that seem out of place, even impossible. Bodies become heavier, movements slow, forms stretch wider, thicker, more immense than their shallow water relatives. For centuries, sailors spoke of giants below the waves, of massive shapes moving through black water, glimpsed only briefly before vanishing again. For a long time, these stories were dismissed as fear and imagination, but the deeper we explored, the more those stories began to feel uncomfortably close to the truth. The blue whale, the largest animal ever to live, outweighs the biggest dinosaurs to walk the land. Its heart is the size of a small car. Its tongue alone weighs as much as an elephant. And yet it moves through the ocean with effortless calm, carried by water that seems to welcome its scale. Far below, in colder and darker depths, the colossal squid drifts through the abyss. Its arms stretch longer than buses, lined with rotating hooks. Its eyes, the largest known in the animal kingdom, are built to gather the faintest traces of light in near total darkness. And even creatures that seem insignificant near the surface begin to change as they descend. The humble isopod, no larger than a fingernail in shallow waters, swells into a slow-moving giant on the seafloor, a scavenger the size of a football, armored, patient, and perfectly adapted to a world that rarely changes. This growth does not belong to one group alone. It appears again and again, in crustaceans, in fish, in cephalopods, even in drifting life that becomes large enough to see with the naked eye. Over and over, the deep sea nudges life toward scale, toward mass, toward enormity. But why? Why would the darkest, coldest, most resource-limited parts of the planet give rise to giants? What unseen forces of pressure, chemistry, and time push life in this direction? And perhaps most haunting of all, is it possible that some of the ocean's largest inhabitants have yet to be seen at all? Tonight, we'll drift gently into that mystery, not to rush toward answers, but to understand how the deep sea reshapes life, and how, in the darkness, the boundary between biology and legend begins to blur. Before we begin, if you enjoy these slow, soothing journeys filled with wonder, a like and a subscribe will be greatly appreciated. And if you feel like sharing, let me know where you're winding down from tonight and what time it is there. It's always comforting to see how far across the globe these deep-sea stories travel. Now, take a slow breath, let your shoulders soften, and let's begin. The descent into the deep ocean is not a smooth fading, but a series of quiet thresholds, each one marked by a change so precise it reshapes everything that exists beyond it. These divisions are not lines drawn on a map, but layers formed by physics itself, stacked patiently beneath the waves. Together they create an environment that feels less like a single place and more like a sequence of worlds, each defined by what is gradually taken away and what is slowly intensified. Near the surface, light still pours down, scattering through water in shifting ribbons. Colors linger here, first reds and oranges, then yellows, then the softer blues. With every few meters, light weakens, absorbed and scattered until illumination becomes memory rather than presence. Eventually, even the most sensitive eyes receive nothing at all. Darkness settles not as an event, but as a permanent condition, unchanging across day and night, season and storm. Below this point, vision no longer shapes the rules of survival, and the ocean's structure begins to impose itself more strictly. As light disappears, temperature follows a slower but equally decisive path. Surface waters respond to sun and air, warming and cooling in cycles that repeat endlessly. Deeper layers are insulated from this turbulence. Temperature drops steadily until it reaches a narrow range near freezing, then remains there with remarkable consistency. This cold is not sudden or violent, but stable and enduring, a background state that persists for centuries. Biological processes slow in response, not by necessity of struggle, but by the simple math of chemistry unfolding at lower energy. Pressure, however, never stabilizes. It increases without pause, adding weight meter by meter, layer by layer. Each descent compresses space itself, pressing on cells, membranes, and molecules. What seems solid near the surface becomes flexible here, reshaped by force alone. Gases behave differently, proteins fold under constraint, and every structure must endure a load that cannot be escaped. Depth is measured not only in distance, but in the constant presence of force. Together, darkness, cold, and pressure form boundaries that are absolute. They do not fluctuate or retreat. They remain in place, enforcing their conditions with quiet consistency. These zones are not barriers that life occasionally crosses, but environments that select, refine, and limit what can exist within them. Each layer removes certain possibilities while allowing others to persist. By the time the ocean reaches its deepest divisions, variability has been almost entirely erased. The surface world, restless and unpredictable, fades into irrelevance. In its place stands a realm defined by permanence, where change unfolds slowly and consequences accumulate over immense spans of time. Within this structure, life does not respond to momentary challenges, but to unyielding conditions that never ease. Every biological outcome that follows is shaped here first, quietly determined by where the water ends and depth begins. The earliest journeys into the deep ocean began with quiet confidence rather than awe. Instruments were lowered with narrow openings, fine mesh, and delicate containers, each one shaped by assumptions carried down from the surface world. Life under pressure was expected to be diminished, reduced by cold, darkness, and scarcity into smaller, simpler forms. The tools themselves reflected this belief, built to capture what scientists imagined would survive, where energy thinned and time slowed. These first expeditions moved carefully, often blindly, guided more by theory than experience. Nets were deployed, dredges dragged slowly across unseen ground, and samples hauled upward through kilometers of water. When the containers were finally opened on deck, the expectation was for fragments, fragile bodies, and minute organisms barely holding structure together. Instead, weight strained the cables, mesh tore, containers returned fuller than planned, heavy with flesh that did not fit prevailing models. What emerged from those early recoveries carried a quiet shock. Larger bodies appeared where small ones had been expected, not once but repeatedly. Limbs were longer, tissues thicker, organs expanded beyond surface equivalents. These forms did not resemble stunted versions of shallow species, but complete organisms shaped for a different set of rules. Their size was not exaggerated or monstrous, but measured and unmistakable, enough to unsettle carefully held predictions. At first, these findings were explained away. Individual specimens were labeled as rare outliers, mistakes of sampling, or artifacts of damaged equipment. It was easy to imagine that nets had drifted, that creatures had been swept in from higher layers, that scale had been misjudged after long retrievals. The deep ocean was still distant and abstract, a place where uncertainty could comfortably absorb contradiction. As expeditions continued, these explanations grew thinner. Larger organisms appeared again, deeper each time, drawn up from zones that allowed little ambiguity. Different regions produced similar results across basins separated by vast distances. Each recovery added weight, not just to the decks of research vessels, but to the growing sense that something fundamental had been misunderstood. The deep sea was not merely tolerating size, but allowing it to persist. The slow accumulation of evidence began to shift perspective. The environment was no longer seen as a simple gradient of increasing difficulty, but as a realm governed by steady conditions that did not punish growth in expected ways. Size appeared less like a liability and more like a long-term outcome, emerging quietly in a place where time extended far beyond surface rhythms. These early expeditions did not resolve the mystery. They did something subtler. They loosened certainty. By returning with bodies that contradicted theory, they revealed that depth was not a universal constraint, but a selector with its own logic. The anomalies remained unresolved for years, resting in collections and records, waiting. With each descent, the same unexpected scale resurfaced, and the deep ocean began, gently and persistently, to rewrite the expectations brought down into it. What began as scattered entries and logs slowly gathered weight through repetition across different voyages and different oceans. Measurements aligned in quiet agreement, specimens drawn from great depth did not simply vary around an expected average. They clustered toward larger forms with surprising consistency. Each new record added another point, and together they traced a shape that no longer felt accidental. The deep was beginning to speak through numbers rather than exceptions. As collections grew, comparisons expanded beyond single groups. Crustaceans, fish, mollusks, and gelatinous drifters followed the same broad arc as depth increased. These organisms shared little beyond the water that surrounded them. Their ancestries branched apart hundreds of millions of years earlier, shaped by distinct histories and constraints. Yet their bodies reflected a shared outcome, heavier and broader than their nearer relatives, repeating a form that evolution had arrived at separately. At first, researchers resisted the implication. Independent lineages arriving at similar solutions unsettled the comfort of chance. It was easier to imagine unseen variables, local quirks, or subtle biases in sampling. But the pattern persisted, even as methods improved and regions widened. Different instruments, different teams, and different decades returned with results that aligned too closely to dismiss. Coincidence began to strain under its own improbability. Statistical analysis, once expected to dilute the anomaly, instead sharpened it. Variation remained, but the overall trend held firm. The deeper the habitat, the greater the average size within many groups. Outliers existed, yet they floated around a central tendency that refused to shift. What once looked like noise now resembled a signal, steady and unyielding beneath layers of uncertainty. Gradually, language began to change. Field notes softened their skepticism. Papers adopted more careful phrasing, acknowledging repetition where hesitation once lived. The idea of a consistent relationship between depth and size entered discussion not as speculation, but as observation. This shift was subtle rather than abrupt, marked by a growing willingness to treat the trend as real, even without full explanation. The recognition did not arrive with triumph or resolution. It arrived quietly, carried by accumulation. No single expedition defined it, and no single specimen proved it. Instead, the pattern emerged the way deep time itself does, slowly, through patience and persistence. Each confirmed measurement added weight, not just to the hypothesis, but to the realization that the deep ocean followed rules that did not mirror the surface world. By the time consensus began to form, the focus had already changed. Attention moved away from whether the pattern existed and toward how such different lives could converge on the same outcome. The deep sea was no longer framed as a place of constant compromise, but as an environment with its own steady pressures and allowances. Within that stability, size appeared again and again, not as an oddity, but as a quiet result of conditions repeated over vast spans of time. The anomalies had not disappeared, they had aligned. Through repetition, independence, and endurance, they had become a pattern, and in doing so, they revealed that the deep ocean did not simply host life, it shaped it with a consistency that only patience could uncover. Change defines the upper ocean. Near the surface, water is never still for long. Winds pass overhead, seasons turn, currents shift direction, and storms stir the layers together. Temperature rises and falls. Nutrients arrive and vanish. Predators come and go. Life here grows within motion, responding to rhythms that repeat but never settle. Survival depends on flexibility, speed, and the ability to recover quickly when conditions turn. As depth increases, this restlessness fades. The deeper ocean exists beyond the reach of weather and sunlight, insulated from daily and seasonal disturbance. Once below the influence of surface mixing, water masses move slowly, sometimes remaining isolated for centuries. Temperature stabilizes within a narrow range. Chemical composition changes little, and the absence of light removes the cycle of day and night entirely. Time stretches differently here, unfolding without interruption. This stability does not mean abundance, but it does mean predictability. The deep ocean offers few sudden shocks. There are no heat waves, no freezing winters, no violent rearrangements of habitat. Instead, conditions persist with quiet consistency. Energy arrives slowly and irregularly, but the background environment itself remains steady. For life shaped within this constancy, long-term survival becomes more important than short-term advantage. Organisms growing under these conditions are not pressured to rush. Without frequent disruption, there is little benefit in rapid growth or early reproduction. Slow metabolisms become viable, spreading energy use over extended lifespans. Development can unfold gradually, allowing bodies to increase in size over decades rather than seasons. Growth becomes an accumulation rather than a race. Stable environments also reduce the cost of failure. In shallow waters, sudden change can erase generations in moments, favoring species that mature quickly and reproduce often. In the deep, loss is slower. Population turnover happens at a measured pace, allowing traits to persist long enough to matter. Larger bodies, once formed, are not immediately penalized by shifting conditions. They can remain useful across long spans of time. This steadiness alters how risk is balanced. Traits that would be dangerous near the surface become sustainable below. Slow movement, delayed reproduction, and extended growth no longer carry the same penalties. The environment does not demand constant adjustment, so organisms can invest in forms that favor endurance rather than speed. Size, in this context, becomes a store of stability, a buffer against scarcity rather than a burden. Over generations, these pressures accumulate quietly. Selection favors bodies that can persist, wait, and endure. Larger size supports this strategy by increasing energy reserves and reducing vulnerability during long intervals between food inputs. In a world where conditions rarely shift, patience becomes an advantage written directly into anatomy. The deeper ocean does not reward growth directly. It simply removes many of the forces that normally prevent it. By softening the penalties associated with time, it allows size to emerge gradually as a consequence rather than a goal. Within this stillness, Life expands not through urgency, but through persistence, shaped by an environment that rarely interrupts its slow unfolding. Cold water reshapes life long before it changes form. At depth, temperature settles into a steady chill that never lifts, a background condition that quietly governs chemistry inside every cell. Reactions slow, movement softens, and the pace of existence stretches outward. Nothing here is rushed. Time itself feels thicker, as if each moment lingers slightly longer than it would above. Within this cold, metabolism adjusts downward. Energy is spent carefully, released in smaller amounts over longer intervals. The frantic burn of surface life would be unsustainable here, so bodies settle into restraint. Muscles contract more slowly, digestion unfolds with patience, and growth is no longer measured in bursts. Daily energy demands shrink, allowing survival on limited input without constant motion or urgency. This slowing does not halt development. Instead, it smooths it. Growth continues, but at a gentle rate that never fully stops. Tissues add mass layer by layer, season after season, without the sharp limits imposed by warmer environments. Where heat accelerates processes toward early maturity, cold delays closure. Bodies remain open to extension for decades, sometimes longer, accumulating size through persistence rather than speed. Long lifespans emerge naturally from this rhythm. Reduced metabolic stress lowers wear across organs and systems. Cells divide less often, damage accumulates slowly, and repair keeps pace with decline. Life here is not defined by short cycles, but by endurance. Years pass without forcing dramatic change, and survival becomes a long conversation between body and environment rather than a rapid negotiation. Within this extended timeline, size takes on a different meaning. Growing larger does not require sudden surplus or rapid expansion. It simply requires time without interruption. Each small addition remains useful rather than burdensome, supported by low energy costs and steady internal balance. Over decades, these increments add up, shaping bodies that appear oversized only when compared to surface standards. Cold also tempers movement. Speed offers little advantage when chemical reactions themselves are slowed. Instead, stillness becomes efficient. Energy saved through reduced motion is energy available for maintenance and growth. Larger bodies can be supported not because food is plentiful, but because energy is released slowly enough to last. The environment does not reward haste, so growth is allowed to continue quietly in the background. The relationship between cold and size is not direct or deliberate. No organism grows larger because cold demands it. Size emerges because cold removes constraints. By lowering metabolic pressure and extending lifespan, it creates conditions where continued growth remains viable rather than costly. The process is subtle, unfolding across generations without sharp transitions. In these waters, life does not aim upward or outward. It expands gradually, shaped by temperature that never changes its mind. Cold slows everything equally, and in doing so, it grants time enough for bodies to become larger simply by continuing to exist. Over long lives, that continuity leaves its mark, written quietly into scale and mass, carried forward without urgency. Oxygen moves through the ocean silently, carried by temperature and depth rather than wind or breath. It enters the water at the surface, dissolving into cold layers more readily than warm ones, then drifts downward with slow currents that can take centuries to complete their paths. By the time this oxygen reaches the deep, it has been sorted and stabilized, held within water that rarely changes its temperature or composition. What remains is not abundance, but reliability. Cold water binds oxygen efficiently. Lower temperatures slow the motion of molecules, allowing more gas to remain dissolved rather than escaping back into the air. As depth increases and warmth fades, this capacity rises. The result is an environment where oxygen, though still limited, is consistently available. It does not arrive in sudden surges or vanish without warning. It persists quietly, woven into the water itself. For living bodies, oxygen sets a fundamental boundary. Every cell depends on it to release energy, and larger bodies require longer internal pathways to deliver it where it is needed. In warm, oxygen-poor environments, this constraint becomes severe. Size is restricted not by space or time, but by the difficulty of supplying tissue fast enough to remain functional. Growth pushes against a limit that cannot be crossed without collapse. In the deep ocean, that boundary softens. Cold temperatures reduce metabolic demand, while higher dissolved oxygen eases distribution within the body. Together, these conditions lower the cost of maintaining larger volumes of living tissue. Circulatory systems can move oxygen more slowly without falling behind. Diffusion remains effective across greater distances. What would strain a body near the surface becomes manageable below. This shift does not force organisms to grow larger, but it removes one of the strongest barriers that usually prevents it. Size no longer guarantees failure. Instead, it becomes an option that can persist if other conditions allow. Larger bodies can function without constant stress, supported by oxygen that arrives steadily rather than urgently. The environment no longer penalizes scale in the same way. Over long time scales, this matters. Traits that would be unsustainable in warmer waters gain stability. Incremental increases in size are not immediately selected against. They remain viable across generations, especially when paired with slow metabolisms and extended lifespans. The deep ocean does not demand efficiency at every moment, only sufficiency over time. Oxygen availability also smooths internal variability. Fluctuations that challenge surface species are rare here. Cells experience fewer extremes, and systems remain balanced over long durations. This consistency allows bodies to invest in volume rather than constant regulation. Larger forms are not maintained through excess energy, but through steady supply and reduced loss. In this way, oxygen shapes possibility rather than outcome. It defines what can exist without dictating what must. In deep, cold environments, the balance shifts gently in favor of size. Bodies grow not because oxygen is plentiful, but because it is dependable enough to support them. Within this quiet margin, larger forms become biologically sustainable, carried forward by water that holds its breath just long enough to let them endure. Pressure arrives without sound or motion. It does not drift, cycle, or fade. It accumulates steadily, layer by layer, pressing inward from every direction at once. At depth, this force becomes the most constant presence in the environment, shaping life not through sudden impact, but through uninterrupted compression that never relents. Every cell exists within this weight. High pressure changes how molecules behave, altering the delicate shapes of proteins and the flexibility of membranes that hold cells together. Structures that function easily near the surface must be reinforced here, adjusted to remain stable as external force bears down evenly across their surfaces. Chemical reactions still proceed, but their pathways narrow, guided by physical limits imposed by depth rather than temperature or energy alone. Small bodies feel these effects immediately. With less internal volume, there is little room for gradual pressure buffering. Cellular structures sit closer to the external environment, leaving less margin for error when membranes stiffen or proteins deform. Minor disruptions can ripple quickly through tissues, placing strict limits on how delicate or compact a body can remain while still functioning reliably. Larger bodies experience pressure differently. Increased volume allows internal systems to spread stress more evenly, reducing the strain placed on any single structure. Fluids distribute force uniformly, preventing localized failure. Within greater mass, cells are cushioned by surrounding tissue, creating a stable internal environment that mirrors the constancy of the surrounding water. This does not eliminate pressure, but it makes it manageable. Over time, this difference matters. Size becomes a form of structural resilience. Larger organisms are not immune to compression, but they are better able to maintain internal balance while living beneath it. Their tissues settle into shapes that resist deformation, and their internal chemistry remains consistent even as external pressure remains immense. Stability replaces vulnerability through sheer distribution. This does not imply strength or rigidity. Many deep-sea giants are fragile by surface standards, their tissues soft and easily damaged when removed from pressure. Their stability exists only within the environment that shaped them. At depth, however, these forms persist without collapse, supported by water that presses equally on every side, holding them together through constant force. Pressure also slows change. Biological systems operating under such conditions favor reliability over experimentation. Sudden structural shifts carry high risk, while gradual refinement within established forms is safer. Larger bodies, once stabilized, provide a dependable framework that can persist across long spans of time. Variation continues, but it moves cautiously, constrained by physics rather than competition. In this way, pressure acts as a selective force without direction or intention. It does not encourage growth directly, nor does it reward complexity. It simply enforces a requirement for stability under load. Size meets that requirement by distributing stress across space, allowing internal systems to function calmly within an environment defined by force. Life beneath the weight of the ocean does not push against pressure, it settles into it. Over generations, forms that could not endure were filtered away, leaving bodies that matched the environment through balance rather than resistance. In this constant compression, size becomes not a statement of dominance, but a quiet solution to living where force never lifts. Movement in the deep ocean follows a different rhythm than it does above. There is little urgency here, no reason to rush through water that rarely changes and seldom demands immediate response. Bodies drift, glide, or rest in place, letting currents carry them gently rather than cutting against them. Motion exists, but it is measured and deliberate, unfolding at a pace that mirrors the stillness of the surrounding world. Speed carries a cost that grows heavier with depth. Rapid movement requires constant energy, sustained muscle contraction, and frequent bursts of power. In an environment where food arrives unpredictably and intervals between meals stretch long, this expense becomes difficult to justify. Each quick movement shortens the margin between endurance and exhaustion. For many deep-sea animals, restraint becomes the wiser choice. Slow movement reduces this burden. Muscles engage only when needed, conserving chemical energy that would otherwise be burned away in constant motion. Drifting and hovering rely on buoyancy and balance rather than propulsion. Over time, this strategy lowers daily energy requirements to a fraction of what fast swimming would demand. Survival becomes less about chase or escape and more about patience and timing. This reduced demand reshapes how bodies are built. When energy is not spent on speed, it can be redirected elsewhere. growth becomes one of the few long-term investments available. Instead of supporting rapid reaction or frequent movement, energy supports maintenance, repair, and gradual expansion. Size increases slowly, sustained by savings accumulated through stillness rather than surplus intake. Slow movement also aligns with the sparse nature of encounters in the deep. Predators and prey rarely meet suddenly. Distances are large, populations thin, and visibility limited. Speed offers fewer advantages in a place where detection is rare and pursuit uncommon. Avoidance through minimal movement reduces the chance of being noticed at all, preserving safety without expenditure. In this context, slowness becomes protective. As bodies grow larger, the benefits compound. Larger mass retains momentum longer, allowing gentle movement with minimal effort. Small adjustments carry more effect, and stability increases. Slow movement becomes even more efficient, reinforcing the cycle that supports continued growth. Energy saved through stillness accumulates over long periods, quietly shaping form without urgency. This does not imply inactivity or weakness. Deep-sea animals are capable of movement when it matters. They can respond decisively during feeding, reproduction, or rare encounters. Yet these moments remain brief, surrounded by long stretches of calm. The balance favors economy over display, endurance over speed. Across generations, this pattern leaves its mark. Selection favors bodies that do not waste energy on unnecessary motion. Forms that grow larger without increasing daily cost persist more reliably. Size emerges not through aggression or advantage, but through efficiency sustained over time. In the deep ocean, movement is not absent, it is simply refined. By moving slowly, life reduces its needs to match what the environment can provide. Within that balance, energy gathers gradually, supporting growth that unfolds quietly, shaped by patience rather than pace. Food reaches the deep ocean slowly, often after long journeys that strip it of immediacy and abundance. What remains arrives as fragments, thin falls of organic matter descending through layers where little is consumed. There is no regular schedule, no reliable rhythm. Sustenance appears when it does, then disappears again into absence. Life below exists within this uncertainty, shaped by intervals rather than events. Between these arrivals, long stretches of emptiness settle in, days expand into months, months into years, without meaningful intake. Fasting is not an exception but a condition woven into normal existence. Bodies are built with this reality in mind, prepared not for constant feeding, but for waiting. Survival depends on enduring absence without collapse. Small bodies struggle under this pattern. Limited reserves vanish quickly, and frequent feeding becomes a necessity rather than a luxury. In an environment where opportunity is unpredictable, such dependence carries risk. A missed arrival can mean failure before the next chance appears. Energy must be spent carefully, yet the margin for error remains narrow. Larger bodies alter this balance. Increased mass allows for greater internal storage, spreading energy across tissues that can release it gradually over time. Fat, glycogen, and other reserves become buffers against uncertainty. When food does arrive, even rarely, larger bodies can absorb and retain its benefits longer, extending survival through prolonged scarcity. Waiting becomes a strategy rather than a hardship. With sufficient reserves, life can afford stillness. Metabolism slows, systems idle, and energy consumption drops to maintenance alone. Time passes without demanding immediate response. Larger size transforms unpredictability into manageable silence, allowing organisms to persist without constant adjustment. This endurance shapes behavior, and form together. Feeding events, when they occur, are often brief and decisive, followed by long periods of inactivity. There is little incentive to chase frequent meals that do not exist. Instead, bodies are tuned for patience, designed to stretch the value of a single intake across extended spans. Growth continues slowly in the background, supported by these stored resources rather than steady supply. Over generations, this pattern reinforces itself. Traits that favor storage, slow use, and long survival without intake persist. Size grows not because food is plentiful, but because the ability to endure its absence becomes decisive. Larger bodies make fewer demands per unit of time, allowing life to remain balanced even when the environment offers nothing. Scarcity in the deep ocean is not marked by crisis. It is ordinary, expected, and constant. Within that constancy, selection favors forms that do not panic in its presence. Larger bodies provide resilience through volume alone, smoothing the sharp edges of unpredictability into long, survivable intervals. In this world, waiting is not passive. It is an active condition supported by form and function working together. Food may arrive rarely and without warning, but those built to endure can remain ready without urgency. Through patience stored in flesh, size becomes one of the quiet tools that allow life to persist, where nourishment is defined less by presence than by the long spaces between it. Energy enters the deep ocean from above, not as a steady stream, but as a slow descent shaped by gravity and time. It begins at the surface, where light allows matter to form in abundance, then slips away from that brightness in fragments too small to notice at first. What sinks does not fall freely. It drifts, rotates, dissolves, and scatters, taking weeks or months to reach the depths below. As this organic material moves downward, it thins. Bacteria consume part of it. Smaller animals intercept another portion. By the time it reaches the deep sea floor, what remains is reduced, altered, and scarce. Yet it continues to arrive, guided by the same quiet physics that governs all vertical motion in the ocean. This steady rain of energy, faint but persistent, becomes the foundation of life far below the reach of sunlight. Most days, this input is minimal. Fine particles settle slowly, providing just enough nourishment to sustain basic processes. Life adapts to this trickle, matching its needs to what consistently arrives. But the deep ocean is not shaped by averages alone. On rare occasions, the surface releases something more substantial. Large food inputs descend suddenly, often without warning. A dead whale sinks intact. A dense bloom collapses and drops as a cohesive mass. A migration above ends, and bodies fall away from the light. These events are infrequent, separated by long intervals, but when they occur, they transform the environment briefly and completely. For small organisms, such events can be overwhelming or inaccessible. Limited capacity prevents full use of what arrives. Consumption is constrained by storage, reach, and time. Much of the opportunity passes by, lost to decomposition or shared among countless competitors. Larger animals experience these moments differently. Greater size allows broader detection, wider reach, and increased storage. When a rare influx arrives, larger bodies can absorb more of it, converting temporary abundance into long-term support. Tissue and reserves expand, carrying the benefit forward long after the event itself has faded into memory. This ability to capitalize on rarity shifts the balance of survival. Growth does not depend on constant supply, but on occasional surplus. Larger animals are not sustained by more frequent feeding, but by better use of what little arrives. One significant input can support metabolism, repair, and gradual expansion across extended spans of time. Over generations, this dynamic shapes form. Traits that favor endurance through scarcity and efficiency during abundance persist. Size becomes an advantage not through dominance, but through capacity. When energy falls from the surface in meaningful amounts, larger bodies are ready to receive it without excess loss. The deep ocean does not reward anticipation, it rewards readiness. Food arrives rarely and without pattern, but its impact depends on who can retain it. In this vertical connection between surface and depth, size becomes a quiet tool, allowing life below to draw lasting value from events that pass quickly above. Through patience and capacity combined, larger forms endure, sustained by energy that drifts down slowly, carrying the distant imprint of light into a world without it. At the far edges of depth, life thins. Conditions narrow what can endure, filtering species gradually until only a small fraction remains. Each meter downward removes possibilities, leaving behind communities shaped by tolerance rather than abundance. Where the surface holds countless forms layered over one another, the deep settles into sparsity, wide spaces occupied by few. With fewer species present, competition loosens. Resources are still scarce, but rivals are rarer. There is less crowding, less overlap of need, and fewer constant encounters that demand speed or aggression. Energy is spent surviving the environment itself rather than defending position against neighbors. The struggle shifts inward from constant comparison to quiet endurance. This reduction changes which traits remain viable. Near the surface, selection favors agility, rapid reproduction, and constant adjustment. Traits that take time or require stability are quickly punished by competition and fluctuation. At depth, those pressures soften. Slow growth, delayed maturity, and long lifespans no longer carry the same cost. Without dense populations pressing from every direction, patience gains room to operate. Forms that would be inefficient above begin to persist below. Large bodies, which demand time and investment, face fewer immediate threats from competitors. There are simply fewer others capable of exploiting the same narrow resources. The risk of being outpaced or displaced diminishes as encounters become infrequent. Size stops being a liability that invites challenge and becomes a neutral characteristic shaped primarily by the environment. This quiet space allows variation to hold longer. Traits are not constantly tested by rivals that share the same strategies. Instead, survival hinges on compatibility with depth itself. Bodies that match the physical and chemical conditions remain, regardless of whether they would succeed elsewhere. Selection becomes less about winning contests and more about not failing quietly. As depth increases, this effect strengthens. Species counts continue to fall, thinning the web of interaction. Predation remains, but it does not saturate the environment. Encounters are separated by distance and time, reducing the advantage of constant readiness. In this context, larger size does not immediately attract pressure. There are fewer organisms capable of challenging it, and fewer opportunities for conflict to arise. Over many generations, this stability allows size to develop without constant penalty. Larger forms are not quickly eliminated by faster or more aggressive neighbors. Instead, they are judged primarily by whether they can persist within the steady demands of depth. Growth unfolds gradually, unchallenged by dense competition that would otherwise favor speed and reproduction over endurance. The deep ocean does not remove struggle. it simply rearranges it. With fewer species sharing the same space, life competes less with others and more with time. Traits that fail near the surface gain a chance to persist, not because they are superior, but because fewer forces act against them. Within this reduced contest, size becomes less risky. It is no longer an invitation to challenge or displacement. It becomes one of many possible outcomes allowed to remain, shaped by physics, scarcity, and patience. In the quiet spaces of extreme depth, life expands into the room left behind, carrying forms that could never survive where competition never rests. Predation does not vanish in the deep ocean. It thins. Distance stretches between lives, and encounters become separated by long spans of quiet. Bodies occupy wide volumes of space with little overlap, moving slowly through darkness that hides both hunter and prey. The result is an ecosystem where danger exists without frequency and survival unfolds across extended intervals rather than constant pursuit. When predators appear, they do so without warning. There is rarely a chase that unfolds over distance. Attacks emerge suddenly from proximity, shaped by detection rather than pursuit. In a place where visibility is limited and sound travels far, encounters resolve quickly. Energy is not spent on prolonged struggle. Either contact occurs or it does not. The outcome is decided in moments, then silence returns. This pattern changes the value of speed. In crowded environments, rapid movement offers escape and advantage. In the deep, speed is rarely called upon. Encounters are too rare, distances too great, and energy too costly to justify constant readiness. Instead, survival leans toward not being encountered at all. Reducing detectability becomes more important than outrunning a threat that may never appear. Larger size quietly supports this strategy. Increased mass allows animals to remain still without constant adjustment, settling into the surrounding water with minimal disturbance. Slow movement produces fewer signals, reducing the chance of detection by predators that rely on vibration, pressure change, or chemical trace. Size also reduces vulnerability when encounters do occur. Larger bodies are harder to subdue quickly, offering resistance through scale rather than force. This does not eliminate risk. Predators at depth are efficient, adapted to seize opportunity when it arises, but opportunity itself is rare. Each interaction carries weight precisely because it is uncommon. In this context, defenses favor endurance and resilience over agility. Avoidance through stillness, camouflage, or minimal movement reduces exposure across long periods, lowering overall risk without constant exertion. As body size increases, this balance shifts further. Larger animals face fewer predators capable of challenging them directly. The pool of threats narrows as scale increases, leaving fewer species able to engage effectively. Encounters remain possible, but frequency declines. Size does not provide immunity, but it alters probability, stretching time between dangerous moments. Over evolutionary spans, this pattern shapes form. Selection does not reward those that flee fastest, but those that remain unseen longest. Energy saved by avoiding unnecessary movement supports maintenance and gradual growth. Bodies that can absorb occasional risk without constant defense persist more reliably than those built for speed alone. The deep ocean does not eliminate predation. It reframes it. Danger exists in brief, decisive moments rather than constant pressure. In this environment, strategies shift away from perpetual readiness and toward quiet persistence. Larger size fits within this framework, reducing vulnerability not by dominance, but by lowering encounter rates and surviving the rare moments when avoidance fails. Within this sparse web of interaction, life is shaped less by contest and more by absence. Predators and prey drift through the same darkness, rarely crossing paths. When they do, outcomes are swift. Between those moments, survival belongs to those who remain patient, still, and difficult to find, allowing size to become a shield formed not by aggression, but by time. Time behaves differently at depth. Days and nights leave no imprint, seasons pass unnoticed, and the slow rhythms of the surface dissolve into a steady, unbroken flow. Within this stillness, life unfolds without urgency. Bodies are not shaped by brief windows of opportunity, but by long spans of persistence that stretch quietly across years and decades. Slow metabolism lies at the center of this pattern. Reduced energy turnover lowers the wear placed on tissues and organs, allowing systems to operate without constant strain. Cells divide less frequently, chemical reactions proceed gently, and repair keeps pace with damage. Life does not burn brightly and fade. It settles into a low, enduring state that favors continuation over intensity. As lifespan extends, growth gains time. Bodies are not forced to reach maturity quickly, nor to invest everything in early reproduction. Development remains open-ended, allowing gradual addition of mass long after surface relatives would have stopped growing. Size accumulates through patience, shaped by years of uninterrupted existence rather than short bursts of abundance. Long lives also allow mistakes to be absorbed. In environments where survival is measured across brief cycles, small failures can end a lineage quickly. In the deep, stability reduces that pressure. Individuals that endure longer experience more opportunities to feed, recover, and reproduce across extended intervals. Longevity smooths the unevenness of scarcity, turning chance events into eventual contributions rather than decisive moments. As bodies grow larger across these extended lives, survival odds improve. Larger size supports greater internal reserves, broader tolerance for scarcity, and increased resistance to rare encounters that might otherwise be fatal. Each added increment of mass carries functional benefit, reinforcing the value of continued growth. What begins as a consequence of time becomes an advantage that further supports endurance. This relationship forms a quiet feedback loop. Long life allows size to develop gradually. Increased size enhances survival, making long life more likely to continue. Generation after generation, this pairing strengthens. Selection favors organisms that persist, grow, and persist further, guided less by competition and more by compatibility with an unchanging environment. The result is not gigantism driven by aggression or dominance, but by continuity. Bodies reflect accumulated time rather than sudden success. Size becomes a record of survival itself, built layer by layer through years that pass without interruption. Each individual carries within its form the imprint of longevity that made its growth possible. In such environments, death is less frequent, but when it arrives decisively. Between those moments, life is defined by duration rather than turnover. Growth remains slow, steady, and ongoing, shaped by the simple fact of being allowed to continue. Longevity does not guarantee size, but it makes it achievable. Size does not ensure survival, but it improves the odds across long spans of time. Together, they form a foundation that supports life in the deep ocean, where persistence matters more than speed, and where bodies quietly expand into the time they are given, becoming larger not by force, but by remaining. Gigantism did not appear once and spread outward. It emerged repeatedly, quietly, in different corners of the deep ocean. carried by unrelated lives shaped by the same surroundings. Lineages separated by vast evolutionary distance arrived at similar forms without guidance from one another. The pattern unfolded independently, yet with striking familiarity, as though the environment itself were outlining the possibilities in advance. Crustaceans enlarged along deep slopes, their bodies extending beyond the limits seen in shallow relatives. Mollusks followed a similar path, expanding mass and shell thickness without sharing ancestry or design. Fish, gelatinous drifters, and slow benthic forms echoed the same tendency, each through its own structure and biology. These organisms did not converge because of shared heritage. They converged because they occupied the same conditions long enough for the same pressures to leave their mark. This repetition points away from chance. When similar outcomes appear across unrelated groups, the cause lies not within lineage, but within place. The deep ocean imposes a consistent set of physical and biological constraints, steady enough to shape form again and again. Over time, those constraints guide growth towards solutions that fit, regardless of starting point. Evolution here behaves less like exploration and more like refinement. Within a narrow range of conditions, only certain strategies persist. Size emerges as one of those strategies, not because it is ideal in every environment, but because it aligns with the demands of this one. Slow energy use, endurance through scarcity, resistance to pressure, and longevity all intersect in ways that allow mass to accumulate without immediate penalty. Different bodies achieve this alignment differently. Some extend length rather than bulk. Others increase volume through softness rather than strength. The details vary, but the outcome remains recognizable. Larger forms appear not as replicas, but as answers written in different languages, all responding to the same question posed by depth. This pattern repeats across oceans and continents, across temperatures and geological history. It does not require communication or proximity. It requires only time spent within the same conditions. Over generations, the environment filters variation until forms compatible with its demands remain. When those demands favor endurance over speed and patience over immediacy, size becomes a common result. The independent evolution of gigantism reveals how strongly place can shape possibility. It shows that evolution is not an endless field of options, but a dialogue between life and setting. When the setting is stable and unyielding, solutions narrow. Life responds not with novelty, but with recurrence. Gigantism in the deep ocean is not an anomaly to be explained away. It is a pattern reinforced through repetition. Each lineage that arrives at greater size strengthens the signal, confirming that the outcome is not accidental. The same conditions, applied consistently, produce the same general solution. In this way, gigantism becomes less about individual success and more about environmental authorship. The deep ocean writes slowly, but it writes clearly. Across unrelated lives, it traces the same contours, shaping bodies that grow larger simply by remaining where those contours persist. Shallow waters impose demands that never fully settle. Temperature shifts with weather and season, currents accelerate and stall, and light drives rapid cycles of growth and decay. Conditions that appear generous in the moment rarely remain stable for long. Life near the surface exists within constant change, and bodies are shaped to respond quickly or fail. Warm water carries less dissolved oxygen than cold. As temperature rises, oxygen escapes more readily, leaving thinner margins for respiration. In these conditions, supplying large volumes of tissue becomes increasingly difficult. Metabolic demands increase, while availability declines, tightening constraints on size. Bodies that grow too large face internal limits that cannot be eased without slowing down, and slowing down carries its own costs near the surface. Predation intensifies this pressure. Shallow environments host dense communities with frequent encounters. Speed, maneuverability, and quick reaction determine survival from moment to moment. Fast predators reward agility and punish delay. Larger bodies require more time to accelerate and change direction, making them easier targets in crowded spaces. Here, bulk invites attention rather than buffering it, and visibility favors those who move decisively. Seasonal change adds another layer of instability. Food availability swings widely as blooms rise and fall, currents shift, and temperatures fluctuate. Growth cannot proceed uninterrupted when resources surge briefly and then vanish. Long developmental timelines become risky under these conditions. Bodies that require years of steady input struggle to complete their trajectory before disruption resets the environment again. Reproduction responds accordingly. Many shallow water species invest early and often, favoring rapid cycles that hedge against uncertainty. Size, which demands time and delayed return, competes poorly with strategies built around speed and turnover. Smaller forms mature quickly, reproduce reliably, and recover faster after loss. In this context, persistence belongs to those who keep moving, not those who keep growing. Warmth also accelerates metabolism. Energy burns quickly, increasing daily requirements and reducing tolerance for scarcity. Large bodies amplify this problem by expanding maintenance costs. Without stable oxygen and consistent food, the balance tilts against continued growth. Size becomes an escalating expense rather than a durable asset. The result is a selective landscape that trims excess. Traits that require patience, endurance, and long stability are eroded by constant testing. Bodies are refined toward efficiency in motion, responsiveness, and rapid completion of life cycles. Even when resources are abundant, they arrive within systems that favor speed over accumulation. Shallow waters do not forbid large size entirely, but they rarely support it for long. The combination of warm temperatures, low oxygen, intense predation, and seasonal disruption keeps growth in check. Size must justify itself immediately or be outcompeted. In this environment, advantage lies in flexibility. Smaller bodies slip through change more easily, meeting the demands of motion and turnover with fewer constraints. Where conditions never rest, growth cannot linger. Size becomes a disadvantage not through lack of potential, but through the relentless pace of a world that does not wait. Large size in the deep ocean does not announce itself through power. Many of the largest inhabitants are surprisingly fragile, their bodies soft, flexible, and easily damaged when removed from their native pressure. Limbs bend rather than resist, tissues tear rather than brace, and structures that appear imposing in silhouette offer little force when touched. Size here does not arise from muscle or armor. It emerges through a very different logic. Strength carries a cost that the deep rarely supports. Dense muscle demands constant oxygen and energy, and rigid structures require investment that offers little return in a place where speed and confrontation are uncommon. In an environment defined by scarcity and stillness, brute force becomes inefficient. What persists instead are forms built to last, not to strike. Endurance replaces power as the more valuable trait. Bodies stretch wide and long not to dominate space, but to distribute stress and store resources. Soft tissues absorb pressure evenly, flexing rather than breaking. Movements remain slow and controlled, conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary strain. Size supports this economy by allowing internal systems to operate gently, spreading demand across greater volume. Many deep-sea giants rely on buoyancy rather than strength to exist. Water carries their mass, removing the need for rigid support. Without gravity pressing downward in the same way it does on land, bodies can afford to be expansive without being reinforced. Size becomes lightness rather than weight, an increase in presence without a matching increase in force. This delicacy does not signal weakness. It reflects alignment with the environment. A body built for endurance need not resist constantly. It must simply remain functional across long spans of time. Fragile tissues survive because they are rarely tested. Encounters that would demand strength are infrequent, and the surrounding water cushions most interactions. Survival unfolds quietly, without repeated stress. In this context, dominance loses meaning. There is little territory to defend aggressively, and few rivals to overpower. Interactions are sparse, and outcomes are decided more by timing and compatibility than by physical superiority. Size does not intimidate, and it does not conquer. It stabilizes. It allows organisms to endure pressure, scarcity, and time itself. Over generations, selection favors forms that minimize unnecessary effort. Muscular excess fades, replaced by structures that support slow circulation, extended storage, and gentle movement. Large bodies persist, not because they can overpower others, but because they can avoid cost. Endurance becomes the currency of success, paid out slowly over years that pass without disruption. This inversion challenges surface expectations. Large size is often associated with strength, aggression, and dominance. In the deep ocean, those associations dissolve. Scale remains, but its meaning changes. A giant drifting slowly through darkness is not a ruler of its surroundings. It is a product of patience, shaped by conditions that reward persistence over force. Size here serves survival, not display. It is not a weapon or a declaration. It is a quiet adaptation, built to hold steady within an environment that rarely asks for strength but constantly demands balance. Growth at depth unfolds on a scale that resists impatience. Bodies do not surge toward maturity. They accumulate mass slowly, measured in years that pass without interruption. Each addition requires time spent alive, time spent stable, time spent undisturbed. Decades may be needed before size becomes apparent, and even then, change remains gradual, layered quietly onto what already exists. This extended growth carries consequences. Resources invested in expansion cannot be invested elsewhere. Energy that might support frequent reproduction is diverted toward maintenance and gradual increase. As bodies grow larger, reproductive cycles stretch wider apart. Maturity arrives later, and offspring appear less often. The rhythm of replacement slows, matching the pace of the environment itself. When reproduction slows, populations thin. Numbers remain low, not because survival is poor, but because renewal takes time. Each individual represents a long investment of energy and years. Losses are not quickly replaced. A single death carries more weight when generations unfold slowly and offspring are rare. The cost of size is paid forward into the structure of the population. Recovery from disruption becomes especially difficult. In environments where growth and reproduction are rapid, populations rebound quickly after disturbance. In the deep ocean, recovery moves at the same deliberate speed as growth itself. A damaged population may require centuries to return to previous levels, assuming conditions remain favorable throughout. Stability is not a luxury, it is a requirement. This makes large size inherently risky. It succeeds only where disruption is minimal and consistent conditions persist. Any sustained disturbance, whether physical, chemical, or biological, can erase decades of growth with little chance for rapid compensation. The margin for error narrows as size increases, placing large forms at the mercy of long-term environmental consistency. Yet this cost does not halt the process. It shapes it. Only environments capable of maintaining stability over immense spans of time allow such investment to pay off. Where conditions fluctuate too often, size becomes a liability that cannot be recovered from once lost. Where change is rare, patience becomes viable, and the cost of growth can be absorbed across generations. This balance explains why large forms remain uncommon despite their advantages. Size is not an easy outcome. It demands persistence, low mortality, and the absence of frequent catastrophe. It requires an environment that remains quietly supportive long enough for growth to matter. In return, it offers endurance, resilience, and extended survival once achieved. The deep ocean meets these conditions more often than most places on Earth. Its stillness allows risk to be spread across time. Losses happen slowly, and gains accumulate just as gradually. Within this framework, the cost of growing large becomes manageable, though never negligible. Large size persists only where stability holds. It is a long-term strategy that fails quickly when interrupted. In the deep ocean, where change arrives reluctantly, growth can afford to take decades. The cost remains high, but the environment allows it to be paid, one slow year at a time. Exploration of the deep ocean advances in narrow steps, constrained by technology, cost, and risk. Each descent reaches only a small slice of what lies below, illuminating pockets of seafloor or open water before retreating back to the surface. Vast regions remain untouched, their conditions inferred rather than observed. Knowledge accumulates slowly, depth by depth, revealing patterns only after long patience. With each extension downward, familiar expectations continue to loosen. New surveys rarely fill gaps with smaller or simpler forms. Instead, they add weight to an emerging outline. Bodies appear broader, longer, heavier, carrying proportions that surpass those found above. These discoveries do not arrive as isolated curiosities. They arrive repeatedly, attached to depth itself, as though scale were embedded in the environment waiting to be uncovered. This consistency matters. Patterns in nature often break when stretched far enough. Extremes introduce exceptions, reversals, limits that restore balance. In the deep ocean, that reversal has not appeared. Greater depth has not revealed a return to smaller size. It has reinforced the same tendency, again and again, across different regions and lineages. Each step downward sharpens the signal rather than softening it. Part of this persistence reflects how little of the deep has been examined. Most expeditions barely touch the upper reaches of the abyss. Fewer still approach the deepest trenches. With every advance, conditions grow more stable, colder, darker, and more pressurized. These shifts align increasingly with the factors that support large size. As depth increases, so does compatibility with the traits that allow growth to continue unchecked. The absence of reversal suggests that the rule governing size is not a narrow adaptation, but a broad response to depth itself. Environmental pressures that favor endurance, slow metabolism, and long-term stability do not weaken with distance from the surface. They intensify. Each added kilometer strips away remaining surface influence, replacing variability with constancy. Within that constancy, size remains viable. Exploration tools also shape what can be seen. Early methods overlooked fragile giants or damaged them beyond recognition. Modern observation reveals forms that were always present but rarely recovered intact. As technology improves, the view widens, and what appears is not contradiction but continuation. Larger life emerges not because it is new, but because it was previously beyond reach. This steady reinforcement reshapes expectations. Depth no longer represents a boundary where size fails. It marks a progression where conditions align more completely with the requirements of growth. Each deeper layer offers fewer disruptions, fewer constraints, and longer timelines. The environment simplifies in ways that allow bodies to expand gradually across generations. The deep ocean does not announce its rules loudly. It reveals them through repetition. Each descent confirms what previous ones suggested. Larger forms appear where depth holds firm, and the pattern remains intact. Until exploration reaches its limits, the rule stands unbroken, carried quietly downward, reinforced by every place where depth is allowed to speak without interruption. Early encounters with the deep ocean were shaped as much by tools as by theory. Sampling relied on nets, dredges, and trawls, dragged through darkness with little precision. These methods were designed to collect, not to observe. Large, delicate organisms were torn apart by ascent, compressed by changing pressure, or destroyed by rough contact with equipment never meant for fragility at scale. What returned to the surface often arrived broken, distorted, or unrecognizable. This damage shaped interpretation. Fragmented remains suggested rarity rather than abundance. Soft tissues collapsed, making large bodies appear smaller than they were. Entire forms were missed altogether, slipping free of gear or dissolving before retrieval. The deep seemed to confirm expectations simply because its most revealing inhabitants were never seen intact. Absence felt like evidence. As technology advanced, the approach changed. Submersibles descended slowly rather than dragging blindly. Cameras replaced nets as the primary interface with depth. Vehicles hovered, adjusted position, and watched life where it existed rather than hauling it upward through hostile transitions. For the first time, large organisms could be encountered without being harmed by the act of discovery itself. These observations altered scale immediately. Bodies stretched across the frame, moving with a presence that could not be reduced to measurements alone. Length, volume, and proportion became visible in context, drifting through water that supported their full size. Organisms once known only from fragments appeared whole, revealing forms that had been underestimated or overlooked entirely. Visual data carried a different kind of certainty. Repeated footage across regions and depths showed the same pattern. Larger life appeared consistently deeper, not as isolated marvels, but as regular inhabitants of their environment. The lens did not select for size, yet size remained. Seeing replaced inference, and uncertainty narrowed. Modern instruments also allowed comparison across depth gradients. Vehicles descended incrementally, documenting transitions rather than isolated points. Size increased gradually rather than abruptly, aligning with physical conditions layer by layer. The pattern held under direct observation, no longer dependent on damaged samples or partial remains. As records accumulated, consistency emerged. Independent expeditions, using different machines and cameras, returned with similar footage. Trenches, slopes, and abyssal plains each revealed large-bodied organisms adapted to their depth. The effect did not diminish with improved resolution. It strengthened, Better tools did not correct the pattern away, they clarified it. This shift changed interpretation fundamentally. What once appeared speculative became grounded. The deep ocean could no longer be described through absence or assumption. Its inhabitants were present, visible, and measurable in their natural state. Size was no longer inferred indirectly. It was observed repeatedly across time and geography. Technology did not create the pattern, it removed the barriers that had hidden it. By allowing life to be seen without disruption, tools revealed what depth had been shaping all along. The rule that larger forms persist deeper ceased to be debatable. It stood not because it was theorized, but because it was witnessed again and again, quietly reinforced every time light returned from the dark, carrying images that spoke for themselves. Darkness settles fully at depth, not as an absence to be noticed, but as a condition that never changes. Without light to structure space, vision loosens its hold on survival. Eyes, where they remain, offer limited return. Shapes blur into proximity, color dissolves, and distance becomes unreliable. In this environment, seeing less does not mean knowing less. It means knowing differently. As vision recedes, other senses expand to fill the space it leaves behind. Touch extends outward through delicate hairs and extended appendages that read movement in the surrounding water. Chemical traces linger longer here, allowing smell and taste to stretch across time rather than distance. Sound and vibration travel far, carrying information through pressure waves that curve and return. These signals arrive softly, layered and continuous, shaping awareness without urgency. This shift favors bodies that can receive and interpret multiple streams of input at once. Larger size provides room for such integration. Extended surfaces offer more contact with water movement. Greater internal volume allows sensory information to be processed gradually without forcing immediate response. Signals can accumulate, overlap, and resolve into meaning without demanding speed. Smaller bodies often rely on quick reactions to brief stimuli. In darkness, such reflexes lose value. Information does not arrive suddenly or clearly. It builds. Awareness becomes something that unfolds rather than strikes. Larger forms accommodate this pacing more easily, allowing perception to extend across broader spans of time and space. With this expansion, reaction speed becomes less critical. Encounters are rare and rarely abrupt. Predators and prey drift through one another's presence slowly, often detected before contact through subtle disturbances. The advantage lies not in rapid motion, but in early recognition. Avoidance or adjustment can occur long before direct interaction becomes necessary. Larger bodies stabilize this process. Their mass dampens sudden movement, reducing noise and signal distortion. Sensory structures embedded across greater area gather information without forcing abrupt change. Awareness becomes continuous rather than episodic, shaped by the gentle accumulation of cues rather than sharp alerts. This does not render movement obsolete. When action is required, it remains decisive, but it is guided by a fuller picture, assembled patiently. Larger forms respond not by sprinting away, but by adjusting position, orientation, or depth with minimal effort. Energy is conserved, and disturbance remains low. Over time, this sensory balance shapes form. Eyes diminish or simplify. Other systems expand, sometimes invisibly, sometimes through exaggerated structures that feel rather than see. Larger bodies support this redistribution more easily, carrying the cost of sensory breadth without sacrificing stability. In the deep ocean, darkness does not remove information. It changes how it flows. Life adapts by widening perception rather than sharpening reaction. Within this framework, size supports awareness, allowing organisms to exist within a space they cannot see by sensing it continuously instead. Speed fades in importance where light never returns. What matters is presence without disturbance, perception without haste. Larger bodies fit this requirement, not as faster responders, but as steadier ones, shaped to absorb the dark and remain quietly informed within it. Sound becomes the dominant messenger at depth, shaping space in ways light never could. Water carries vibration efficiently, allowing even faint disturbances to travel far beyond their source. A subtle shift, a distant movement, a single contact with the seafloor can ripple outward, tracing paths through darkness that connect bodies separated by great distance. In this environment, presence is often known before it is seen, if it is seen at all. Because sound travels so freely, movement takes on new weight. Every motion creates pressure changes, currents, and vibrations that announce location. Rapid movement sends clear signals, drawing attention across a wide radius. In a place where encounters are rare and decisive, such announcement carries risk. Remaining unnoticed becomes more valuable than reaching a destination quickly. This dynamic reshapes how bodies move. Large, slow animals produce fewer abrupt disturbances than smaller, faster ones. Their mass displaces water gradually, smoothing turbulence into long, low-frequency waves that blend into the background. Movements unfold slowly, allowing sound to dissipate rather than spike. The result is a quieter presence that merges with ambient noise instead of cutting through it. Stillness amplifies this effect. When bodies remain suspended or rest without adjustment, the surrounding water settles. Sound fades, detection decreases, and the organism becomes part of the environment rather than an interruption within it. In this silence, risk diminishes. Predators and prey drift past one another without encounter, separated not by distance, but by absence of signal. Larger size supports stillness naturally. Greater mass resists small currents and random motion, reducing the need for constant correction. Buoyancy balances weight, allowing bodies to remain stable with minimal effort. Small organisms must move frequently to maintain position, generating repeated disturbances. Larger forms can pause longer, conserving energy and remaining acoustically quiet. This quiet does not imply inactivity or vulnerability. It reflects alignment with the medium itself. When action is required, movement occurs, but it is measured. Shifts in position are purposeful rather than reflexive. Energy is spent sparingly, and sound is produced only when necessary. Stillness becomes a form of control rather than passivity. Over time, this strategy shapes survival. Those that remain quiet reduce encounter rates across long spans, lowering cumulative risk without constant effort. Large bodies that drift slowly or rest motionless benefit most, as their silence extends outward, creating space where detection is unlikely. Endurance emerges not through confrontation, but through remaining undisturbed. Sound also fades into silence with distance, creating natural boundaries shaped by movement rather than territory. Life distributes itself within these acoustic fields, overlapping less often than it might appear. The ocean remains full, yet interactions remain sparse, buffered by quiet. In this world, stillness becomes a survival strategy woven into form and behavior together. Size supports it by smoothing motion and softening sound. Slowness protects by reducing signal. Within water that remembers every disturbance, the greatest advantage lies in leaving little to remember. Stability alters how time presses on life. In environments where conditions shift slowly, the urgency to change diminishes. Selection still operates, but its pace softens, guided more by long compatibility than by immediate advantage. In the deep ocean, where temperature, light, and chemistry remain remarkably consistent, evolution loosens its grip, allowing forms to persist without being reshaped at every turn. When pressure eases, older body plans endure. Structures refined long ago continue to function without penalty, requiring little modification to remain viable. Appendages, proportions, and internal layouts that would be outcompeted in restless environments remain effective here. The deep does not demand constant innovation. It permits continuity, rewarding designs that simply keep working. This persistence is visible across many groups. Lineages that retain primitive features survive alongside more derived relatives, not as relics struggling to persist, but as forms well suited to a steady world. Their anatomy reflects solutions reached early and retained because there was no urgent reason to abandon them. Change becomes optional rather than necessary. Gigantism fits within this pattern of preservation. As bodies grow larger, they often do so by extending existing frameworks rather than inventing new ones. Ancient traits are not replaced, they are magnified. Proportions stretch, tissues expand, and scale increases without altering fundamental design. Size becomes a vessel that carries older structures forward into the present. This expansion reinforces stability rather than disrupting it. Larger bodies buffer internal systems against minor fluctuations, allowing ancestral arrangements to remain functional across long spans. Traits that evolved under different conditions persist because the environment no longer challenges them directly. Gigantism does not overwrite the past. It shelters it. Deep time moves slowly under these conditions. Generations pass without sharp environmental inflection, allowing continuity to outlast innovation. Evolution continues, but its steps are small and measured. Selection favors forms that fit within an enduring framework rather than those that gamble on rapid change. The past remains close at hand, layered into living bodies rather than buried beneath them. This does not imply stagnation. Variation still arises and refinement continues at the margins. Yet the overall architecture remains familiar, shaped long ago and preserved through patience. The deep ocean becomes a repository of forms that elsewhere would have been reworked or replaced, not because they were superior, but because nothing forced them to change. In this context, gigantism functions as a stabilizing force. By enlarging bodies without altering their blueprint, it allows ancient traits to persist visibly and functionally. What appears as novelty in size is often continuity in design. The deep ocean enlarges what already exists rather than reinventing it. The result is a living archive where modern life carries echoes of distant ages. Stability preserves, and preservation allows size to accumulate without erasing history. In the quiet depths, evolution whispers rather than shouts, and ancient forms continue forward, expanded by time rather than reshaped by urgency. Gravity shapes life wherever it dominates, pressing downward with constant insistence. On land, mass carries consequence. Bones must thicken, joints must reinforce, and muscles must bear weight at every moment. As bodies grow larger, structural demands increase rapidly, placing hard limits on size long before energy or time run out. Growth becomes a negotiation with collapse. Water changes that relationship entirely. Buoyancy offsets weight, lifting mass and distributing it evenly through surrounding fluid. Bodies do not rest on their own structures in the same way. Instead of supporting themselves against gravity, they are held by the medium they inhabit. This quiet support alters what is possible, easing constraints that shape life on land. As buoyancy increases with depth, structural limits soften further. Pressure replaces gravity as the dominant force, compressing inward rather than pulling downward. Bones do not need to thicken to prevent collapse under weight. Muscles do not need to tense constantly to maintain posture. Internal frameworks can remain lighter, more flexible, and less rigid without sacrificing integrity within water that bears their mass. This shift allows growth to follow a different rule. Instead of being limited by weight, size becomes limited by time. Bodies can continue to expand as long as energy, oxygen, and stability allow. The ceiling imposed by gravity lifts, replaced by a horizon defined by patience. Growth proceeds slowly, not because structure fails, but because accumulation takes time. Larger size underwater also demands less reinforcement per unit of mass. A longer body does not require proportionally stronger support when buoyancy carries most of its load. Internal tissues can remain soft, reducing metabolic cost and material investment. Expansion becomes efficient rather than burdensome, supported by a medium that shares responsibility for form. This does not imply absence of constraint. Pressure, temperature, and resource availability still shape outcomes. But gravity, one of the strongest limiting forces on land, recedes into the background. Without the need to resist constant downward force, life gains room to explore larger forms without paying the same structural price. Time becomes the primary requirement. Growth unfolds over decades, each addition layered onto a body already supported by water. As long as conditions remain steady, nothing forces growth to stop abruptly. Size increases gradually, accumulating through persistence rather than strength. This difference explains why certain sizes appear improbable on land, yet common underwater. Forms that would collapse or overheat beneath their own weight on the surface persist easily in the ocean. What appears enormous by terrestrial standards becomes manageable when mass is shared with the environment itself. Buoyancy also reduces the risk associated with size. Falls do not occur. Strain concentrates less sharply. Movement does not require lifting weight repeatedly. Energy can be invested in maintenance and growth rather than constant support. Size becomes a sustainable outcome rather than a structural gamble. Underwater, large size is not a defiance of gravity, it is a partnership with buoyancy. Growth continues not because bodies grow stronger, but because they are allowed to grow without being crushed by their own mass. In water, the limits that bind life on land loosen quietly, and time takes their place as the measure of how large life can become. Rules that govern life near the surface fade as depth increases. Familiar patterns loosen, and assumptions built from sunlight, warmth, and rapid change lose relevance. In the deep ocean, biology is shaped by a different framework, one defined by constancy rather than fluctuation. What succeeds here is not what thrives above, and the contrast grows clearer with every descent. Surface biology favors immediacy. Energy appears and vanishes quickly. Predators and competitors interact constantly, and environments shift on short timescales. Evolution under these conditions rewards speed, rapid reproduction, and constant adjustment. Bodies are shaped to respond fast or fail. Efficiency is measured in moments. None of these pressures dominate at depth. Change arrives slowly, often imperceptibly, and conditions remain steady across long spans. Energy moves gradually, encounters are rare, and disturbance is infrequent. Within this setting, patience becomes the defining advantage. Evolution favors traits that persist rather than react, accumulating success quietly rather than seizing it abruptly. Speed loses its central role. There is little incentive to move quickly in an environment where opportunities do not demand urgency. Fast reactions provide diminishing returns when encounters unfold slowly and unpredictably. Energy spent on constant motion offers little advantage, while energy conserved supports survival across long intervals. Stillness and restraint replace motion as reliable strategies. Size aligns naturally with this framework. Larger bodies support patience through endurance. They store energy efficiently, buffer internal systems, and tolerate long periods without change. Growth unfolds gradually, not because it is forced, but because nothing interrupts it. In the deep, size fits not as a weapon or display, but as an expression of compatibility with time itself. Evolution under these rules proceeds differently. Selection pressures remain, but they operate gently, favoring reliability over novelty. Traits persist because they work well enough for long enough. Innovation occurs, yet it is refined slowly, filtered through generations that experience little disruption. The result is a biological landscape shaped by endurance rather than experimentation. This difference explains why comparisons between surface and deep life often mislead. Judging deep organisms by surface standards obscures their success. What appears inefficient above becomes optimal below. Soft bodies endure where rigid ones would waste energy. Slow growth succeeds where rapid turnover would fail. The deep does not remove challenge, it reshapes it into a test of persistence. Within this altered framework, size no longer carries the same penalties. Large bodies are not immediately disadvantaged by oxygen demand, predation, or instability. Instead, they benefit from steady conditions that allow time to accumulate value. Evolution rewards those that can exist quietly without constant correction. Over long spans, these rules reinforce themselves. Life adapts to the deep, not by resisting its constraints, but by aligning with them. Speed fades, patience rises, and size becomes viable without aggression or excess. The deep ocean supports forms that grow slowly and last long, shaped by an environment that rarely changes its mind. This is not a harsher version of surface biology, it is a different one entirely. Here, success is measured in years rather than seconds, and survival belongs to those that fit the deep by allowing time to do its work. Knowledge of the deep ocean remains uneven, built from narrow windows opened briefly before closing again. Sampling reaches only small portions of a vast environment, guided by limited time, cost, and access. Each expedition illuminates a fragment, leaving surrounding areas untouched and unmeasured. What is known forms islands of certainty, separated by wide spaces of inference. Many forms of life have never been observed directly. Countless species remain undescribed, existing beyond the reach of nets, cameras, and submersibles that rarely linger long enough to capture full diversity. Fragile bodies evade collection. Rare organisms pass unseen between visits separated by years. Absence in records often reflects absence of observation rather than true rarity. These limitations shape the pattern itself. Size trends appear clear where data exists, yet the map remains incomplete. Depth zones vary across regions, shaped by geology, circulation, and chemistry that shift subtly from place to place. What holds in one basin may express itself differently in another. Without broad coverage, certainty remains provisional, assembled carefully from what little has been gathered. Measurements also favor what can be measured. Large organisms draw attention because they are visible and striking, while small ones fade into background noise. This bias complicates interpretation, demanding caution when drawing boundaries or defining limits. The pattern of increasing size with depth persists despite these constraints, yet its edges remain blurred. Time adds another layer of incompleteness. Many deep-sea species live long lives and reproduce slowly. Short observational windows capture moments rather than cycles. Population structures, growth rates, and full life histories remain poorly understood. Without long-term monitoring, key processes unfold beyond reach, leaving interpretation reliant on partial snapshots. These gaps do not weaken the existence of the rule. They frame its context. Repetition across unrelated regions and groups suggests underlying consistency, even as specifics remain unresolved. The pattern appears robust enough to persist despite limited data, yet flexible enough to resist a single, simple explanation. The absence of a final explanation reflects the complexity of deep environments rather than failure of understanding. Multiple forces intersect, interacting across timescales that are difficult to measure directly. Each factor shapes the outcome without acting alone. Untangling their combined influence requires patience equal to that displayed by the organisms themselves. As exploration continues, new discoveries refine rather than overturn what is known. Larger forms still appear with depth. Exceptions remain rare and contextual. The pattern holds, even as its mechanism remains partially obscured. In this sense, the deep ocean offers guidance without closure, revealing consistency without complete disclosure. Incomplete knowledge does not imply imminent resolution. It reflects the scale of what remains unseen. The rule exists as an observed tendency, grounded in evidence yet open to revision as new depths are reached and new forms revealed. Until then, understanding advances slowly, shaped by fragments that align more often than they contradict. The deep ocean rarely offers definitive answers. It presents patterns that persist through uncertainty, inviting attention rather than conclusion. Within its vastness, the rule of increasing size with depth stands not as a finished statement, but as an enduring observation, awaiting further light that arrives only in brief, careful descents. Human presence reaches the deep ocean quietly, carried not by footsteps but by machinery lowered from above. Operations designed for extraction descend into environments that evolved without disturbance for immense spans of time. The seafloor, once shaped only by slow geological motion and drifting organic matter, now encounters deliberate alteration compressed into short human intervals. Mining targets regions rich in minerals formed through processes that unfolded over millions of years. These deposits accumulate slowly, often alongside unique biological communities that depend on their stability. When extraction begins, the change is immediate. Sediment lifts into the water column, structures are disrupted, and chemical balances shift. For organisms adapted to stillness and predictability, even minor disturbance can resonate far beyond its point of origin. Recovery in these environments proceeds at a pace unmatched by surface ecosystems. Growth is slow, reproduction is infrequent, and recolonization depends on rare dispersal events. What is altered in days may require centuries to resemble its former state if it recovers at all. Time, which supports growth and stability under natural conditions, becomes an obstacle when change is sudden. Large, slow species carry particular vulnerability within this context. Their size reflects long lifespans, delayed maturity, and infrequent reproduction. These traits support survival under steady conditions, yet offer little defense against rapid disruption. Losses cannot be replaced quickly. Populations thin quietly, without dramatic collapse, fading over spans that are easy to overlook but difficult to reverse. Because these organisms move slowly and occupy limited ranges, avoidance is often impossible. Disturbance arrives faster than response. Habitats altered once may remain unsuitable for generations. Even indirect effects matter. Increased sediment can smother feeding structures. Noise and vibration propagate through water that carries sound efficiently, extending impact far beyond visible zones. Ancient systems face pressures they never evolved to withstand. Selection favored patience, endurance, and slow accumulation. It did not prepare life for abrupt mechanical change imposed without warning. The mismatch between evolutionary timescale and human action creates fragility, not through weakness, but through incompatibility. This impact often remains unseen. The deep ocean lies out of sight, and its changes do not announce themselves clearly. Shifts occur gradually after disturbance, unfolding over decades rather than moments. Loss becomes evident only in long comparison, when absence replaces presence quietly and completely. The challenge lies not only in preserving species, but in recognizing the value of systems shaped by time rather than speed. Deep-sea giants embody strategies that work precisely because they assume stability. When that assumption is removed, their advantages dissolve, leaving little buffer against decline. Human influence now intersects with environments defined by slowness. The contrast is stark. Rapid extraction meets ancient continuity. Short-term gain presses against processes measured in centuries. Within this tension, deep-sea giants persist only if disturbance remains rare. Their vulnerability is not a flaw. It is a reflection of how long they have lived without interruption. As modern pressure reaches deeper, the outcome depends on whether patience, once rewarded by evolution, is allowed to endure alongside progress. Beyond the depths already reached, the ocean continues without boundary, descending into regions mapped more by inference than observation. These zones exist below familiar contours, where charts thin and certainty fades. What lies there is shaped by the same forces already traced, carried further into environments that have rarely been visited and never fully observed. As depth increases, conditions simplify. Temperature settles into near permanence, currents slow, and seasonal influence disappears entirely. Disturbance becomes increasingly rare. Stability deepens alongside darkness, extending the same framework that supports patience, endurance, and slow accumulation. The deeper the environment, the more consistent it becomes, offering fewer interruptions to long biological processes. Within such constancy, the logic that has guided size so far does not suddenly fail. It finds room to continue. Energy still arrives from above, infrequently but persistently. Oxygen remains available in cold water. Pressure replaces gravity as the dominant physical constraint, and buoyancy continues to support mass. Each factor that has favored larger forms remains present, often amplified rather than diminished. Exploration to date suggests that size trends do not flatten easily. With every deeper descent, organisms often exceed expectations built from shallower comparisons. Larger appendages appear, bodies lengthen, lifespans extend. The absence of reversal hints that the pattern may not yet have reached its upper expression. Unexplored zones likely host conditions even more stable than those already known. With fewer disruptions, growth can proceed uninterrupted across longer spans. Size, under such circumstances, becomes less constrained by sudden change and more dependent on time itself. Growth that takes decades closer to the surface may unfold over centuries below. this does not imply unchecked expansion. Constraints still exist, shaped by energy availability, chemistry, and biological integration. Yet none of these enforce an abrupt ceiling based solely on depth. Instead, they stretch limits gradually, allowing size to increase incrementally rather than explosively. The deep ocean rewards accumulation, not excess. Larger life may therefore persist unseen, not because it defies known rules, but because it fits them too well to be encountered easily. Sparse populations, slow movement, and vast ranges reduce detection. Absence from records reflects difficulty of observation rather than absence of existence. As technology reaches further, discoveries may continue to follow the same quiet trajectory. Each new depth explored may reveal forms that align with established patterns rather than overturn them. Size increases may appear subtle at first, expressed through length, mass, or longevity rather than dramatic form. Over time, these increments accumulate into bodies that redefine scale. The possibility of even larger life remains open not as speculation, but as extension. The deep ocean has not yet contradicted the trajectory it has revealed. Where stability persists and time stretches long, growth finds opportunity. Size continues to fit the deep, not as a sudden marvel, but as a natural outcome of patience extended beyond familiar limits. What remains unseen does not break the rule. It waits within it, shaped slowly by depth that grows calmer with descent, allowing life to continue exploring scale without hurry. Across distant basins, separated by continents and currents, the same tendency appears. Different oceans, shaped by different histories, express a shared outcome. Where depth increases, size follows. The repetition does not depend on location. It emerges in cold trenches and broad plains alike, tracing a quiet consistency through water that never meets. This persistence spans species that share no close relationship. Lineages diverged long before modern oceans formed, yet respond in similar ways when placed under comparable conditions. Bodies lengthen, masses increase, lifespans stretch. The response appears again and again, not as imitation, but as convergence shaped by environment rather than ancestry. Time does not break the pattern. Fossil records and modern observations align in outline, even when details differ. As oceans changed over geological eras, the tendency endured. Ice ages passed, currents shifted, continents moved, yet the deep maintained its influence. The rule persists not because it resists time, but because it fits within it. No confirmed exception has overturned this trajectory. Variations occur, shaped by local factors and incomplete sampling, yet none invalidate the underlying tendency. Where depth deepens and stability increases, size tends to grow. Deviations soften or blur the signal, but they do not reverse it. The rule remains intact through noise and uncertainty. What makes this striking is the absence of design. No single force commands the outcome. There is no guiding blueprint, no directive embedded within life itself. Instead, the pattern arises from the accumulation of constraints that align rather than conflict. Temperature, pressure, oxygen, food delivery, and time converge without coordination, yet produce a consistent result. The ocean enforces this rule quietly. It does not advertise or accelerate it. Growth unfolds slowly, often unseen, carried forward by patience rather than intensity. The deep does not reward ambition. It allows persistence. Within that allowance, size finds room to increase without spectacle. Because the rule has no author, it invites humility rather than explanation. It exists as an outcome rather than an intention. Attempts to isolate a single cause falter because the rule belongs to the system as a whole. It emerges from balance rather than dominance, from cooperation among limits rather than triumph over them. This absence of authorship gives the pattern its strength. Without reliance on one mechanism, it remains resilient to variation. Change one factor slightly, and others compensate. The outcome persists not because it is forced, but because it is favored repeatedly by the same conditions. Across oceans and eras, the deep repeats itself. Larger forms appear where depth extends, shaped gently by constancy and time. The rule does not announce its presence. It reveals itself through accumulation, becoming visible only when observations are placed side by side. In this way, the ocean writes without words. It allows life to respond to depth in predictable ways without prescribing form. The result is a pattern that holds without instruction, enduring because it belongs not to intention, but to environment itself. The deep ocean settles into a rhythm that rarely breaks. Beneath the shifting surface, movement slows and noise fades into distance. Currents soften, temperature holds, and time stretches into long, even spans. What appears mysterious from above reveals itself as something remarkably composed. The deep is not disorderly. It is deliberate. Cold permeates everything, slowing chemical reactions and easing the pace of life. Energy moves gradually through bodies that have adapted to wait rather than rush. Processes unfold over years instead of moments. Growth does not surge or stall. It continues quietly, guided by conditions that remain steady long enough for patience to become productive. Within this calm, life takes on forms shaped less by urgency and more by endurance. Survival depends on fitting into an environment that does not reward speed or constant adjustment. Instead, stability allows organisms to invest in long-term strategies. Bodies enlarge not through aggression or dominance, but through accumulation. Size becomes a reflection of time spent rather than force applied. The cold, the pressure, and the darkness do not compete with one another. They align. Together, they create an environment where extremes soften into consistency. Disturbance is rare. Change arrives slowly. Life responds by slowing in return, finding balance through persistence rather than reaction. In this setting, growth follows a different logic. It does not seek quick payoff. It accepts delay. Large bodies emerge because nothing interrupts their progress. Given enough time and stability, form extends outward naturally, supported by water that bears mass and cold that eases demand. The result is size that feels inevitable rather than exceptional. The deeper one descends, the more these patterns reinforce themselves. Pressure increases, yet it remains constant. Light disappears, but conditions settle. The environment becomes simpler, not harsher. Life adapts by aligning with this simplicity, shedding traits that serve chaos and retaining those that suit calm. The rule persists within this framework. Larger life appears where depth provides time and stillness. It does not announce itself dramatically. It emerges quietly, revealed through careful observation rather than spectacle. Each descent confirms what earlier ones suggested. The pattern holds because the environment continues to support it. Nothing in the deep demands urgency. There is no hurry to grow, no pressure to compete intensely, no need to change quickly. Evolution slows to match its surroundings. Growth unfolds steadily, sometimes over centuries, shaped by conditions that rarely surprise. This calm reality defines the deep ocean more than its darkness ever could. It is a place where life expands by learning to wait. Size remains not as an anomaly, but as an outcome that fits perfectly within a world built on patience. As depth increases, the rule does not fade. It becomes clearer. Within cold water and steady pressure, life continues to grow differently. The deeper we go, the more the pattern remains, quiet, consistent, and unbroken by the passing of time.